Welcome to our broadcast. My name is Monica Kunekweguta. I am your host today, and I am privileged to be talking to Sandra Mutambanengwe, and we also call her Sandy Villa. And Sandy, can you just say a little bit about yourself? Can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Sandra. Like Monica said, we went to high school together, so we've come from quite a while. um, I think this evening we want to tackle the issue of breast cancer to try and demystify things, to try and remove the fear that is associated with breast cancer, and it helps that you get to hear it from someone who's walked that path, someone who's lived the fears and so on. So hope we can discuss those issues and remove fears that a number of people might actually have.
Okay, so while we wait for Maxine, I don't know where the sound is coming from. Whilst we wait for Maxine to join us, we
Mhm.
probably can just talk a little bit about only she's trying to log in, technical issues, but we are all fired up and excited to be raising awareness. And this topic is very important, that we keep reminding ourselves. I don't think this is something that should just wait for 1 month in a year, but it is something
Mhm.
that we should continuously talk about, remind
Mhm.
each other, and also just continuously raise awareness, because this is one of the killers, especially for people in the Black community, and it
Mhm.
needs to be talked about, so that the tabooness of it, the stigma of it, you know,
Mhm.
will vanish. People behave as though we've got so much control about what happens to us when we're not feeling well. But
True.
it's not quite a choice, because an illness can just befall on anybody. Um,
True.
I don't know. Maxine is struggling to log on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just help her out in a bit. Okay. So hopefully she'll be able to hop in. So without probably wasting time for those who are actually waiting and watching, can you tell us about your journey? How did you find out that you had breast cancer?
Um, my story is a bit of a strange one because it started off, right here on social media and on Facebook. I read a story. There was a lady who sadly had passed on about 3 weeks earlier in 2015. And before she passed on, she actually said, I would want you to share my story. She said this to her family, she said this to her friends. And so what she shared was her journey right towards the end. And one of the things that she stressed was how, as women, we need to constantly test and check our bodies, check for. And I think growing up, and for most people, I would think, the issue that we all knew of when it comes to breast cancer was, feel for lumps and feel your armpits. And we always used to do that. And so often would do it, but not really know what it is you're looking for and what it is you're expecting. Um, but one thing that was new when I read her story was when she said you need to squeeze your nipples and see if there's any discharge. And I remember when I read the story, thinking, okay, how do I do that, and what will it mean? And I think a few days after reading the story, I then, taking a shower, ready to go to work, just a normal day. I did try, the squeeze test, but for me, it was just, routine, just something you do. And lo and behold, I did get, like a discharge. And I thought, no, it's probably just, a coincidence. Tried it again later that evening after work. This time there was actually blood. And then I panicked, I think like we all would. And then I tried again 2, 3 days later, and I still got the same the blood, after squeezing. And that is when I went to see a doctor, my GP then, and I explained to him what I had seen. And, that's when he said, no, let me refer you to a specialist. And I went to see the specialist, and they said, okay, we need to do, scans. Let's start with the mammogram. We went for the mammogram. And then while I was there, they said, no, 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 let's actually do what they call a ductogram, where they check the ducts in your nipples and see if there are any blockages. And so they did all that. And I think the whole time, the whole process was actually quite a daze for me, because I couldn't believe that we went from just reading a story to now
Mm-hmm.
going through all this. And so they did all the tests. I went for the MRIs, the scans, and the nightmare became a reality. All of a sudden, everything I was reading in her story became my reality. I now had to deal with the reality that there was breast cancer in my right breast. And so they did some tests to do, a biopsy to see whether it really was breast cancer. And then they did one surgery to take out a piece. I think maybe for those, it might not always be automatic that everybody understands what it means. They take out a piece of your breast tissue, take it for tests, and then they see the number of cells, if there are any cells. And so they did that. And then they said, no, we need to um, get a bigger sample so that we're sure, what is going on. And so they did that in 2016. Yes. And sadly, it came back again. There were cancer cells. And then that's when I was told, you see, the way the cells are placed, for us to try and go in and get bits and pieces, you'll probably end up with just a disfigured breast. So it might be best to just remove the whole thing. But the left side was fine. And then they gave me a choice. Do you want us to leave the one breast or remove both of them? Just to be safe, rather than all constantly worrying about if you're going to get it again, because there was a chance that it would actually move across to the other side. That was still fine. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to make that hard decision. So what do you do? You're faced with such a decision. And then I was um I was away from family. I had my friends, and my
You
friends became family. I was in Namibia then.
right.
And so, making those decisions, trying to talk to family in Zim, trying to talk to my mom, and trying to, come up with a decision. And I'm glad that for me, there was a lot of support, and people allowed me to make that decision. And they said, look, whatever you decide, we'll support you. And I opted to have both of them removed. And so far, I have not had any problems, but I need to constantly go for review so that they check that, it hasn't gone anywhere else. But so far, I'm fine.
Okay. So you said you were in Namibia.
Yes.
I'm hearing an echo. I wonder where it's coming from.
Oh, okay. Yes, I was in Namibia then.
Okay. And so
Mhm.
how is breast cancer viewed in our community?
Sadly, and I'm sorry to have to say this, but sadly, our Black community is not very, I don't want to say embracing, but we tend to stigmatize. There's a stigma associated with not just breast cancer. I know right now we're talking about breast cancer, but just cancer in general, especially for ladies. You have issues of your cervical cancers and the breast cancer, and those are things that are associated with who you are as a woman. And so
Mhm.
often there are many women who delay to actually go and get help because they worry, what if I go to the doctor and the doctor decides, no, 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 we need to remove your uterus? What do we do when you need to remove your breasts? Those are things that are associated with being a woman, and very few can actually handle that. And sometimes it's not even the problem with the patient. Sometimes the problem is with the family and friends around you. People start asking you, and people can be very insensitive. They may not mean to, but they end up actually being very insensitive because they'll ask you, "Ah, but if they remove your breasts, that means you're not a woman anymore, you know?" And so there's so many people who have held on to a sickness because of
Mhm.
fear of what the world will say if you come back and you say you don't have breasts, whether it's both of them or one of them. Or, God forbid, if you actually lose your uterus. People think, so if you don't have a womb, what does that mean for you? Yes, there's the obvious that you won't be able to have children. But I think the biggest stigma happens in relationships where somebody thinks, so how are we, what does this mean sexually? And so these are issues that need to be addressed in our communities, just so that people are aware that it doesn't necessarily change your lifestyle. Yes, physiologically you may be different, but it
Mhm.
doesn't change who you are as a person. And that is the kind of message we need to pass on to even as young children, so that when girls grow up, when boys grow up, they know what it means and what are the implications, so that people don't hold on to either a uterus that's so damaged or breasts that are really, messed up because you're afraid of what the world will say.
Oh, I'm glad Maxine is
Hi.
finally here. Yay! Oh my goodness, I was
Amen.
so worried. I was so
Mhm,
worried. This is Maxine. So we'll just allow Maxine to introduce herself, and then we just continue with our topic of
mhm,
bringing awareness, as
mhm,
well as just I'm learning so much as well, because some of these things you get to learn about them if you've had experience of somebody who's close by who has experienced that illness. Then you get to know the ins and out of it. I think we will also one day we'll talk about HIV and talk about how people have responded to that. But I was actually surprised that there is stigma attached to breast cancer. But Maxine, I'll allow you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, thank you so much, Monica, for doing this. Thank you so much, Sandy, for coming and sharing your story. My name is Maxine. I'm a friend of Monica. I've done health and wellness for most of my life. This, as a Black woman and as a woman in general, this is such an important topic. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And, I'm just here to listen, to learn, to share, to understand, and to spread awareness.
Yeah, that's so true. So Sandy was just telling us about her story, her journey, how she discovered that she had breast cancer. And Sandy, so with the doctors that you saw during that process, can you
mhm,
can you share the different views? I don't know how many you saw, but the different views that they had, depending on culture or
mhm.
depending on just their own views about femininity and what having breast and not having them mean.
Okay. I had a very good team of doctors, and strangely, I don't know whether it's strange or not, but the team was all male, and they were very understanding
Right.
in ways that I hadn't quite prepared myself for, because I think at first I was very self-conscious, dealing with men and these issues. You're thinking, okay, so what does this mean? But they were very helpful and they were very empathetic. I think they were actually more empathetic than some of the female counterparts, who kept stressing the issue of, are you sure you want to lose your breasts? Are you sure you want to become less of a woman? And I remember telling one of them, but it doesn't mean, I stop being Sandra because you have lost breasts. Because I'm not defined by my breasts. I'm not defined by, because if we allow ourselves to be defined by body parts, what does that mean for somebody who's in a car accident and they happen to
Right.
lose a limb? So are we saying they stop being a person? And that's how I chose to look at it. To say, you know what, this is just a body part that is doing me harm by keeping it on me. And so have it removed. If it will save my life, it will give me more time with my children, with my family and friends, then by all means remove it. And so that helped a lot. But definitely there is still that whole issue of what will the world say? What will people say? And I remember one doctor actually saying, so do you want to go have plastic surgery just afterwards for, reconstructive surgery so that you don't give people a chance to actually notice that there's a difference? And I remember having a chat with a plastic surgeon, and she was female. And she said to me, I'll give you the pros and cons of going for plastic surgery. It's not as easy as it looks on TV. And I think that's the other thing. People don't realize the pain that goes through, the whole process. You don't just wake up and, oh, okay, you don't have breasts. Tomorrow you wake up, you have breasts. It's a long, drawn out process because they need to stretch your skin so that they put in those silicone thingies, and it's not as easy as it looks on TV. So it's definitely important for that knowledge to be imparted on women, and especially imparted on healthy women, so that you process that information before you get sick. Because once you're sick, there's a lot going on in your mind and you don't think clearly. But if you've processed that information before, it's easier to make up, your mind when you are in the situation. So, in terms of doctors, I didn't have much of a problem in terms of the stigma, but definitely it does happen. Like I was saying, yes, we may be talking about breast cancer, but there's the issue of cervical cancer. And I remember one time where I had a problem with with fibroids in my uterus, and people were saying, no, but you see, just hold on to it. You never know, you'll probably change your mind and you want more kids. And I said, but the pain, I'm the one who's experiencing pain. So again, there are a lot of women who are going around carrying huge, and I mean huge, 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 huge lumps in their tummy because they're afraid to have it removed, because again of what the world thinks. If you have your uterus removed, you're less
Mhm.
of a woman. Then obviously, surely, if that was the case, then there are a lot of, less women around, because there are many women who've had a hysterectomy, but again, they're afraid to say it because
Mm.
of what the world will think, of what their partners will think. Because some partners will tell you, well, so if the uterus is not there, so if I go inside, where am I going? Am I going in intestine? I mean, so it's a lot of ignorance on our
Yeah.
part. It needs to be addressed. Mm.
So it sounds like there is a lot of educating that needs to happen
Mm.
to both
Sure.
men and women. I think it's
Yes.
also the same reason that men uh, only get their prostate cancer attended to when it's too late, because it is
True.
attacking their sexuality, it is attacking their manhood rather, and they will be thinking that if they're worried that maybe something might get chopped off, and they're worried that they might end up not being able to be the men. And I think we're running the risk of defining a human being by just a part of
True.
their body, which you know, once everybody is educated around it, it probably would seem as though people view someone who's had an accident, like you said, and lose their leg. They
Mm-hmm.
view them with a sympathetic eye, and then
True.
judge someone who's had their breast removed or who's
Mm.
had something else, the uterus removed, which I'm
True.
finding, I'm finding it surprising that we process things that way.
Mm.
So, Maxine, in your experience as a nutritionist or someone who does healthy eating, healthy habits, what is your take on the discussion that we have?
Well, Monica, prevention is always the way to go. And breast cancer is hereditary, so know your family's history. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's suggested that after age 45 to about your mid 50s, you know, if it's available, have a mammogram done every year, you know. And like everything else, your diet, weight is a factor that can contribute to that, and alcohol as well, right? So it's just being aware and doing everything in moderation, you
All right.
know?
True.
Mm-hmm. So, being aware, doing everything in my, are there any foods that you would recommend to say, you know, if you eat this, it helps? I think it's about also boosting your immune system.
Absolutely. Leafy greens, you know, the superfoods, kale, spinach, asparagus, omegas, salmon, things like that. I mean, eating cleaner, you know, cutting down. I mean, as I don't, you know, I don't know if it's the same in Zimbabwe, but in the Caribbean, our diet is very carby. You
Right.
know, the breads, the yams that are better for us, but we eat it in very big portions, right? So go back to making food your medicine and having the
Mhm.
proper portions with that, you know. And you know, we've gone to an age of convenience where everything is a flick, you know.
Right.
Get up and walk 30 minutes a day, you know, get out there, play with your kids, enjoy the outdoors. I
Mhm.
mean, these are things that we grew up with, but as technology advances, you know, we overlook these things, and these are the things that are still our saviors.
Right. I saw there's a clip that you sent me when we were discussing about this topic, and I was actually shocked that they're saying breast cancer and cervical cancer, Zimbabwe's new twin evils.
Mm.
Yes.
And so the fact that it is becoming those two are becoming the highest killers of
Mm.
women in Zimbabwe, and that we don't talk about it. And also the fact that women are dying because of shame, worrying
Mm.
about shame and worrying about what people think. It seems as though people need to develop their resilience muscle in a way that they don't care about what anybody else says, because you're the one who's feeling the pain. And if you ignore the illness and it gets to a point where it's incurable, you're the one who's leaving the children. As we know that most women are the ones who are really running these households. And so you think about what will happen then when you're not around to look after your children. So a lot of the things that need to be taken care of, I think first and foremost is the mind.
Mhm.
The mind needs taken care of. So Sandy, would you like to jump in?
Yes, yes, I definitely agree where you say the biggest battle is in the mind, because that is the one place that nobody can touch, you know. And I feel for me that was my biggest weapon, perhaps,
Mhm.
making a choice. You need to make that decision to fight. And like you're saying, only then will you be able to block out a lot of the noise, because noise will always come. People will
Mhm.
always come. But I still believe it's not just the issue with the patient. Maybe the best is if let's say we have a patient that's diagnosed, they need to counsel not just the patient, but everyone around her. Let's start with her immediate family, her children, her partner, her family, her siblings, because those are the people who usually cause the most damage if it's not handled
Mhm.
properly. Because it's very easy to ignore somebody who's talking, who you don't really know. But if the people around you say, but Monica, why do you want to go and have your breasts removed? But you're not the only one. Go for chemotherapy, go for radiotherapy. Again, depending on the stage of the illness, it may not be the best option, and it may actually do more damage. So I think the moment the issue is discovered and they say there is breast cancer,
Mhm.
everybody around the patient needs to be, counseled and told how to handle the illness, because that is where a lot of the pressure comes from. It comes from those closest to us. And so, as much as one might actually want to fight, if you're
Mm.
surrounded by the supposed support structure starts fighting you, it's very hard for anybody, no matter how resilient you may want to be or you may be. So we need to address this issue at family level, and then we go to community level, because as we always say, charity begins at home. It's pointless to expect our colleagues at work to understand when your own family doesn't. So I think that is where we actually need to start. And if it starts at school, we have sex education. We need to start including then the cancer education if we're saying the figures are that bad and they're causing so much damage. So that
Mm.
needs to start at an early age, so that it's not a mystery. It's not a scary thing when it then does happen. People then know how to handle it better, I think. I think it's an issue of not handling the sickness as best as we can.
Right. So obviously, if you don't have your family around you to support you,
Mhm,
um, it obviously would do a lot of damage, because it's
mhm,
what they say. So they can
mm.
speak life and death,
Or death.
or
Mm,
death,
mm,
depending on how they
true.
say it. And when you're
Mhm,
not feeling well, naturally, when we are not feeling well, we
mm.
look pale, we lose weight,
True.
and
Mhm,
it doesn't matter which illness you're suffering from. And
mm,
it will be disturbing then that when you are vulnerable like that, your family member will look at you and say, ah, you're
true.
gone, you're
Mhm,
gone.
mm.
And how do you then pick yourself up after that?
Mm,
The
mm,
person that you are trusting that they will pick you
mm,
up, they will say, lean on
mm,
me. They'll say, I got you. They'll hold your hand. They're saying you're gone. So
mm,
someone who you meet on the street is not going to say you will make it, because
mm,
your own family has really given up. So if somebody has
mm,
said you're gone, how much more effort are they going to make to ensure that you have eaten that day,
mm,
to ensure that you are clean that day, to ensure
mm,
that you are taking your medication? If they have
mm.
already written you off,
True.
what is left for them to support you? And
Mm,
it is really important that, so the stigma is
mm.
that what people need to deal with. Is
True.
there then a task force in Zimbabwe which just doesn't talk about it, but actually is educating, is really going around schools, clubs, talking about breast cancer, not only leaving it to the doctors and health professionals who are in the field, who have got awareness, are in contact with people suffering from breast cancer, and know the danger. Do we have other voices that are speaking on this topic?
Um, okay, I haven't done enough research on it, but I
Mm.
do realize there's Rwisa Cancer. Rwisa
Okay.
Cancer is a group that focuses on awareness and support on people who are actually either in the process of getting treatment or survivors. And then they share their stories with other people just so that they encourage, you know, people who are actually going through the struggle. Because I always find it so much easier to get
Hmm.
to get to get support from someone who's been through it. I think it's human nature. If you've
Right.
gone through something, I'm more likely to listen to what you're saying than to somebody who hasn't. I think that's just how we are wired as humans. And then we also have the Cancer Association of Zimbabwe. I know they meet, there's a support group that meets on Wednesdays, Wednesday afternoon. Again, it's just to sit and talk with people, share experiences, offer support to
Hmm.
those who might actually either have just received the news and they still don't know how to process it, because we process things differently, and we take news differently. I'm one of those people that when I get such news, I remember when I got the news, I kept it to myself for a week before I told anybody, because
Mm.
that's how I process things. I dealt with it in my own mind, processed it, and then by the time I then told my family and friends, I was ready for the. So what are you gonna do? So are you ready? So so what's the next step? That worked for me. It may or may not work for the next person. So there are some support groups. There are some oncologists. I think there's a campaign going on at the moment. Oh, I forgot, but I know her name is Dr. Sakai. Yes,
Mm.
she helps a lot of cancer people who are fighting cancer, even survivors, just how to deal with things and how to handle, the whole process. And so definitely there is work happening, but I still believe we can do better. And I think
You're right.
we'd probably have better results if more survivors came up and just encourage people to say, what, oh, okay, there's Maxine, there's Monica. Oh, okay, life still goes on. Because sometimes if you're just surrounded by people who are sick, you know, who are also
Right.
coming in for chemo, you're all at your most broken. And so it's very hard to encourage anybody or even inspire anybody else to have hope. But if you
Mm.
see someone who's past that stage, who's now in remission, or who is actually, whose life has moved on in spite of what they've been through, that
Right.
helps a lot. And I think if we have a lot more of that going on, we'll
Mm.
probably have better results, and the numbers will start coming down because people will come forward sooner rather than later, out of fear and all
Mm.
those other things. Mm.
So, Maxine, living in Canada and also being of Jamaican background,
Mhm.
what is your experience on that topic? The prevention, protection, mitigation.
You know what? This is the thing about breast cancer. Breast cancer is a cancer that is highly survivable. Is that a word?
Mm.
I mean, 88% of women will survive breast cancer
Mhm.
for at least 5 years, right? And, I think, Sandy had mentioned that if more people came and spoke, that,
Mhm.
it would enlighten people that, you know what, this is beatable, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we educated more people that, at this time when our loved ones, are diagnosed with cancer, it's a time for compassion and understanding. And that is going to add to our healing,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And, Sandy, maybe this is something that you can touch on. I mean,
Mhm.
part of, in any woman's journey, it is, being prepared in life, having those emergency fund, whether it's a critical illness, that little money that we stash away under the bed for those emergencies, you know,
Mhm.
um, if you can, you have to prepare for when life throws these curveballs at you, so you know
Mhm.
what, maybe Sandy, you can share some of the things that how it impacted your life on a day-to-day basis. Did you have someone to
Mhm.
look after your kids, and who cooked for you, and work, and all those things that it involved in your day-to-day activities?
Mhm.
Yes, that
Um.
goes to how did you pay the bills? Because that whole time everything stops.
Mhm.
You can't focus at work. You can't work. You
Mhm.
have extra expenses, which
Mhm.
includes childcare. How did you pay the bills?
I think when I mentioned earlier, when it happened, I was in Namibia, and my kids were in Zim for school, so they'd usually just come on holidays. But I had an amazing support structure,
Mhm.
not just in Namibia, but even in Zim. My sister is an SA. I could call her anytime. My mom, my sister-in-law, my brother. I had an amazing structure. My dad. So it was very easy not to fall apart, because even on days where I was falling apart, there'd be someone to pick me up. And then in Namibia, I had amazing sisters. The family that I then found. Sometimes I think some, like people always say, family is not always blood. You know,
Mm.
I have my best friend was she carried me through all this, and she's someone who, she would go with me to the doctor and say, you know what, I don't trust you to tell me all the facts. You tend to try and be strong and not say things. So I'd go with her even on my doctor's visits, and she would come up with questions that sometimes even I might have missed. So that's another thing. It's always good to have, maybe not everybody, but to have one or two people who are there throughout the whole journey. So I had that. I had Chiedza, I had Tendai, you know, and they were always with me throughout. Would go to doctor's visits and right up to surgery. Each time I went for surgery, she'd be there, like walk all the way until they say, okay, fine, like stop, 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 you stop here. So that kind of support helped me, focus on healing the body,
Mhm.
not so much the mind, because a lot of, like we were saying, the battle happens in your head and in your mind. So you don't need to be worrying, like you're saying, about what am I going to eat. There'd be soup. People would bring soup. They say, you even if you don't wake up, don't worry. And I'd wake up honestly and find food in on the table, and find food in the fridge, and there'd be soup, like little elves, people just coming and going. And so that helps a lot when you do have that structure. And I was able to take time off work and still, get my salary. Like you're saying, how do you pay the bills? And I was on medical aid. And I always say, when they say God places you where you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
If I had been in the sim, I don't know if I would still be here today to have this
Mm,
conversation with,
Right.
because it's a totally different ballgame. With our medical, I think we all know what's going on. You know, I might not have been able to be on medical aid. I don't know. There are people who are dying now because they don't have access to hospitals. They don't have access to the right doctors. Some go to a
Mm.
clinic, they tell cancer, and that's it. And then she goes home, and then she tries to get some herbs and all sorts of things. So sometimes it's where you are. For me, I think that is what saved my life. That it happened when I was in a place where the health sector could take care of me without me doing very little. Unlike here, I'd have had to struggle to raise the money. I didn't have to
Mm.
pay any money upfront. But sometimes you find now, for somebody to get any help, with or without medical aid, you need to pay cash up front. And
Right.
so, who has, like Maxine was saying, a stash for a rainy day? These days, every day is raining, every day is a thunderstorm. So it's very difficult for you to say, I'm saving for a rainy day, because it's raining every day. And
Right.
this year is even worse with the pandemic. I think everybody's little nest egg has hatched by now. And so that's another thing. And sadly, life doesn't stop because the world is falling apart. And life doesn't stop because you have cancer. They don't, like, the world doesn't care. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Life has to go on for everybody else. So if you don't have medical aid, if you're not in the right country, so to speak, you do die before your time. You die before um, you get help. So that's another thing where we need that extra support. And like I was saying, there's Cancer Association of Zimbabwe. Some of
Mhm.
these things we don't know. I'll give an example. When I came back, I decided I needed new prosthetics, because I got prosthetics to use after
Mhm.
the operation, because I chose not to have the um, reconstruction, because I was not ready for that level of pain. I'd had enough already. So when I came back, I then thought, okay, now where am I going to get replacement prosthetics? And I remember it took me a year from when I decided I want to get them to actually getting them, because I kept thinking, obviously, with the way things are so expensive in Zimbabwe, oh my goodness, I'm going to pay with my foot or pay with my whole arm. But when I went there, I actually found there were like 100 RTGS, like our local currency, like 100. Then I think it was like the equivalent of maybe $10. versus when I was in Namibia, I bought them for 150 US dollars. So sometimes again it comes back to lack of knowledge. I was
Mhm.
going to go on and on, probably try and order from Namibia, thinking it's probably more expensive here. So that information needs to go out as well. Where you can get, if you go to Cancer Association, they'll sell you they do have prosthetics, yes, and they have a whole lot of other information that people can have access to. But
Mhm.
again, like I said, because people don't know, you probably end up going to pay more, I don't know, more expensive things when you could have them cheaper, just because
Right.
you don't know. Mm,
Okay. So I hear the word insurance there that's coming up where you're
mm,
saying you had medical aid. And you also
mhm,
mentioned that you were in a country which had that.
mhm,
So I think also here people in the diaspora, they already have these things available to them.
mm,
They
mhm,
do not step up and take
mhm,
advantage
mhm,
of putting these
mhm,
things in place because they
mhm.
are thinking that this will happen to someone else, not me.
True, true,
So,
true.
so this is what I'm getting from you because even though you were in Namibia, you could have just decided that, you know what
Mm,
do I need medical aid for? And you would
mm,
not have put that in place so that
mm,
when the rainy day came, you
mhm.
did have the cover that you needed to to
True.
get the healing that you need. But also a lot of people, possibly in South Africa, in Namibia,
Mhm,
Zimbabweans, and here in Canada and in the US,
mhm,
who are not taking advantage of all those systems that are in
mm,
place to
true.
support. That was a great question, Maxine.
Yeah.
Mm,
Monica, if I could just add
Yeah, go
something,
ahead.
I'm just going to throw some numbers your
Right.
way, and this might, probably won't even shock you, but every day, about 75 Canadian women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. And depending on what stage they catch it, it's going to cost them anywhere from about 25 to over $35,000.
Mm,
So, when your mind is not thinking and you have all the storm coming at you,
mm,
at
right.
that time, that amount of money can seem like three times more
mm,
because there's so many other things that you have to plan and take
Mm,
care of. So it becomes so insurmountable that, you know, you have to sit with these uncomfortable
right.
conversations,
mm, mm,
you
mm,
know?
mm, mm. That's true.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking when you say the amount that is
Mhm,
needed for treatment, and if you don't have it, and then you're
mhm,
diagnosed, that statement comes up again. You're dead. You're gone. Because this is
uh,
what your mind will be telling you. I don't have the resources to make sure that I am well. I can't feed myself. My
mhm,
family is back home, whether in Zimbabwe or wherever. I have got kids that are going to school. What am I going
mhm,
to do? That
mhm.
panic alone, I think it will make your illness speed up.
True.
Absolutely.
If it was going at 5 miles per hour, it would be going at 65. And then once it's on 65, how do you put the brakes when you still don't have something to circumvent it?
Uh, Another thing, Monica,
Mhm.
is when you do have medical cover, let's take time to see what when we choose our packages, what
Mm.
is covered in the cover because
Right.
so often we say, let me take the diamond package, or let me take the gold package, but not really take time to know what that package
Mm.
covers. And I remember, okay, I confess, I'm one of those people who also used to say, okay, so Monica, what are you getting? Okay, Maxine,
Right.
what are you getting? Without actually, really taking time to go through and see what that cover, entails. And when you are now faced with that issue, you now need to know. So, does it cover your any radiotherapy? Does it cover any chemotherapy? Does it cover prosthetics? I didn't need to know all that, but all of a sudden it became my reality. And
Right.
I know, oh, okay, so I need to ask medical aid people, like, so can I get my prosthetics on medical aid? Like, who thinks of those things? They're such random
Mm.
things. But
Right.
unfortunately, there's always a chance that you'd need to. So those are some of the things to look at, whether you're in Zim or in Canada or in the States or in Jamaica, wherever you are, you need to be sure what is it that is covered by, and that's where you find sometimes, because we tend, I mean, it's human nature to say, okay, let me try, like you're saying, let's save the buck, let's save the dollars. I have many other costs. What if it doesn't happen to me? So why pay so much on medical cover? Why not just pay the bare minimum? But one day, it may not be you, it may be a child, and you have
Right.
compromised. I think we've all watched the movie John Q, where he has been paying, medical cover, but because the company didn't explain what it means, when his child was sick, they couldn't do the surgery because it wasn't covered. And he says, but I've been paying all these years. So it's the same thing. We need to be sure that what we're paying for, will help us tomorrow, because we may pay for years. And then when D-Day comes, you're told, sorry, excuse me, pay cash. So that's
Mm.
another thing I think we need to add. Mm.
Go ahead,
It,
Maxine.
I just want to summarize this, that people, they don't even blink when it comes to paying insurance for their car. It is a no-brainer.
Mm.
But to properly protect themselves and their families,
Mm.
that's a hard one for them to digest.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
like throwing money away.
Yeah.
So it's coming across as though we are uncomfortable with facing certain realities about life. So, what is it? What is it about not confronting or looking at something that is terrifying and deal with it? Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
I think it comes back to, like we're saying, the fear of death. I think more than anything,
Mm.
preparing for death. You know, it's probably taken as taboo. Like, why are you preparing for the worst case scenario? But
Yeah.
sadly, when the worst case scenario becomes your reality, yeah, trust me, it's not fun. Where you're now faced with this humongous bill, you're now faced with this reality that, you know what, I actually could die. And it's not
Mm.
an easy thing to say, to actually vocalize it and say, you know what, if this doctor messes up, I may not wake up. you know that conversation, before we even get to me having it with you, my sisters, for me to
Mm.
have that conversation with myself is not something that's easy for a lot of people. Actually, just acknowledge that there's a possibility that I might not make it. There's a
Mm.
possibility that chemo won't work. There's a possibility that the surgery won't work. There's a possibility that radiotherapy. So, you know what? Let's put our head in the sand and hope for the best. And that's what a lot of
Mm.
people end up doing. And by the time they realize, this is not working, they're panicking, and
Mm.
it's too late. So probably all the other issues were correct. There's some family support, there was financial support, but the person was afraid to face death. Because sadly, it is what it is. If you're diagnosed, there's a chance that you may not make it. And
Mm.
the sooner you get help, the better. It sounds too simplistic, but that's actually the truth. The sooner we get help, the better our chances of beating the cancer. Mm.
Okay. So my next question to you is, did you already have final expenses before the diagnosis, or your awareness was raised when you thought, oh my goodness, I've been diagnosed with this and this could happen to me? What would I do if that happens? Because it looks as though, to me, it appears you actually face things head on, and you are quite what's the word? You you don't beat about the bushes. You face your problem
Mm.
head on, and you deal
Resilient.
with it. She's resilient, and she deals with it. So I'm just curious, knowing what you're telling us now.
Mhm.
Did you, prior to being diagnosed, did you already
Mhm.
have seeing that you lived in the diaspora, did you
Mhm.
already have your funeral policy or final expense, or it is something that you said, "Oh my God, if this happens, now what am I going to do?"
Um, like I was saying, I think because when you're in a working economy, certain things you actually don't think of. I think even here in Zim, most companies insist that you're on a funeral policy, you're on medical aid for most big companies, I think. And
Right,
so it's a no-brainer. It's there. It's compulsory. And I think it's because in the past people have had to then deal with huge medical bills when the worst case does happen. And so obviously as a company, you know how we are as family, we'll run to HR and say, HR, this person has worked for you. They're sick. So what do you expect us to do? Same thing
mm,
when somebody dies. So I think a lot of companies now also to cushion themselves,
right,
it's actually compulsory for most companies to then, I mean, for most employees to be on medical aid and to have funeral cover. So I think that one, it was, I didn't have to think about it. It was part of my contract. You know, you get medical aid, your funeral cover, insurance and stuff like that. But again, it's something you do without thinking. It's not, you're not doing it because, oh no, I'm so organized. I don't think, no, I can't take that credit. It was not because I was so organized and I have my things. No, no, no. My ducks were in a row because it was company policy. And then
right.
one day somebody, you know, blew a gun and the ducks flew away and you have to face the music. And when it comes to, like you're saying, in terms of resilience, I think the way I was raised, you're forced to face the music. You're made to be accountable in good
Mm,
and bad situations. I've been blessed to have very strong characters around me, very strong women. My grandmothers, my mother, my aunts, you know, I have very strong women around me. And like you're saying, women who don't beat about the bush, if you mess up, they'll tell you, you know.
right.
And when things are bad, they'll say, you know what, let's buckle up and fight. We'll deal
Mm,
with the issues later, but crying is not going to solve anything. And so that is how, for the most part, I've tackled almost any issues that I've had to encounter. And I think I was telling Monica earlier, I had issues with fibroids, you know, and I ended up having to have a hysterectomy. So you can imagine the kind of pressure you then have as a female. You don't
right.
have a uterus. Oh, you don't have breasts. Oh, so what does that make you? You know, like a unicorn. So it's those kind of things that you need to you need to sort them out in your own mind and say, you know what, this is what's happened. So what do we do? Do we sit and cry? Look, you
Right.
allow yourself. I always think you need to allow yourself a moment to break down and cry, let it out. But then you get up and face the music because, unfortunately, love, we don't have time for us to be sitting and crying because
Mm,
the cells are growing and they grow every day. And the more we sit and cry and we're miserable, it gets worse. So it's really just, I think for me, what helped was just making that decision to say, okay, so what are we doing? Fight or flight? Fight
mm,
or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. And you pick up, you know, all your weapons. And sometimes your weapons are prayer. Sometimes your weapons are your family. Sometimes your weapons are your friends. Sometimes it's the medical, you know, the doctors, the nurses around you. And you find, I've also noticed that even the health practitioners treat you differently when you fight. You know, nobody wants to do with the patient. I've seen it. And I used to see where you're with a fellow patient and they're constantly, you know, whimpering and whatnot. Nurses sometimes will look at you and say, it's not as painful as you're saying, you know, fight, 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 fight. And so you learn, you know what, I don't want to upset these people, you know. So let me do my part. And then they'll do that. Because they'll keep telling you, you know what, you need to, we can only do so much. The biggest battle is with you and with your
mm,
own mind, with your own thoughts. That is where, like Maxine said, the biggest battle is up here. If you if you win this battle, the
mm,
rest are easier to you know to fathom. And like I'm saying, please don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean things were easy, not at all. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes we lose the battle, sometimes we lose the patient. But I always say, let's make the journey as easy and as bearable as possible for everyone. Let's not feel sorry for the patient, and let's not make their lives unnecessarily hard by saying instead, some very sensitive things. If you don't, I'd rather you keep quiet than to go and attack a person, when they're already down, they're going through so much. Better to sometimes just come up to me and ask. I've had people come to me and and say, you know what, I'm very curious. And you say, okay, what is it that you want to know? I say, please see. You see, uh, uh, at first you think, oh, okay,
I
see
know.
what? No, no, it's true. And then you say, but you don't blame them because it's not every day you actually know someone, who's gone through it, who you can actually come and ask. So I've had people come to me and say, you know what, Sandra, I know this is probably going to sound inappropriate, but I would want to see your scars. I want to see your chest, what it looks like. And at first you're thinking, oh, but then you say, I think this is part of that whole knowledge. People want to see. And I remember even when it happened for me after the surgery, I took pictures and sent to my mom because she wasn't able to be there, for the surgery. And I remember thinking, so do I send my dad the pictures as well? Because he was there for the surgery. But again, same thing. I'm thinking, does he have an idea of what it looks like? So I sent the pictures to him as well. And then when he came for the visit, he goes, you know what? I actually slept today because the picture I had in my mind, I thought they just grabbed it and hoed it off, and then this whole, like craters, and I remember laughing so hard and thinking, this man is crazy. But it comes back to knowledge. So it
Yes.
says, at least now I know, now I can picture it, I can see, because in my mind, and it's true, if I hadn't shown him, the poor man was probably worried my child has just been massacred, you know. But when I showed him, no, this is what happened, they did an incision, they did this, and I explained to him what the doctor said to me as well. Trust me, that day, like he said, I slept easy because I knew, oh, it's actually not as bad as what he had in his mind. So sometimes we need to share, if you're the patient, sometimes tell the family, tell the friends what's going on, because a lot of their panic comes from not knowing what's going on and not knowing what it is you're going through and how bad things are. And sometimes, even when you say, no, look, I'm in pain, they now understand, say, oh, okay, well, you explained that time, there's nerve pain, because obviously when they remove your breast, they try and go into your lymph nodes as well to make sure, it doesn't spread and whatnot. And that affects your nerve endings. And sometimes you have no sensation, and all those things are things you need to explain, because tomorrow I'm going to wake up and tell you, you know what, I'm in pain. And you're thinking, child, you had the operation 5 months ago. What do you mean you're still in pain? But if people know, then those around you understand. Same thing with our bosses. Again, you're not telling everybody, but even at work, tell people what's going on, so that there are days where you wake up and you really are in terrible pain. You can't move. The body just gives in sometimes. But if they know what's going on, it's very easy for them to then understand when you say, you know what, I need a day. I need a day. I just need, today's a bad day. Then when you
Right.
come back tomorrow, the beauty of it is stop being a victim. Don't be a victim. Don't
Mm.
make people feel sorry for you. Don't act like, oh my gosh, look at me. Oh, I'm so sick. I had cancer. So what? So what? Yes, you had cancer. But life goes on. Let's keep moving. Don't feel sorry for yourself, and people will feel sorry for you. It's that simple. And I think that battle again we're talking about, where you need to fight for you. You need to fight for your family and friends, so that, because okay, maybe I don't like having people feel sorry for me, because it makes me feel like a loser, and I don't want that. So I think if we all try as much as possible, when you do find yourself in that situation, fight. Fight for you, fight for your family, fight for your friends, so that people don't feel sorry for you. Hmm.
Okay, so another question that came up as you were speaking.
Oh, okay.
There is stigma when somebody is HIV positive. When
Mm-hmm.
they are getting a new partner, they worry about how they're going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, like one of those people that when you meet a new partner, then
Mhm.
at what stage do you think is it necessary to tell them that you had hysterectomy? Obviously,
Um,
the breasts, they are visible. At
well,
what
yeah,
point?
well, okay. Talking of the breasts, I use prosthetics, and so let's see if it's clear. Mm. Okay, if you don't know, you would not know. So that's a start. You
Sorry,
don't.
maybe I need to get some of those prosthetics. Help a sister out.
Oh my goodness! You want your own pay, huh? Okay. Okay. Back to the question. I think with any sensitive issue, I don't think you meet somebody and say, "Oh, hi, I'm Sandra. I had a hysterectomy." They'll look at you funny. But I think as you're getting to know a person, you'll slowly realize, okay, uh, where we're at now, does this
Mhm,
person want a serious relationship? One, two, do they want kids? Because surely I think it's selfish to be in a relationship knowing you've had a hysterectomy and you know for a fact you can't have kids anymore or kids at all. Because sadly, there's some people who actually have a hysterectomy before they have any kids at all. So I think the moment you realize, this relationship is going in the direction of, this person is serious with me, I think it is important to have that conversation, and the sooner the better. Because don't wait a year, two, and then you tell somebody, oh well, by the way, because obviously they've invested themselves in you. So it's not a first date type of conversation, but
mm,
I don't think you should wait too long to have that conversation, and you need to time it right. Again, like I said, you need to get to know the kind of person, because sometimes there are some who run for the hills before they even ask any questions and implications of what it means. So I think don't wait too long, but it's not a first date type of confession. I don't think you'd meet somebody and say, "Oh, well, hi, I'm Sandra. I had a hysterectomy. Oh, by the way, oh, and my boobs are gone." Ah, they'll run away. Let them
they'll
get
run
to know
away.
you so that they realize. Because I think the argument there being, as I always say, I'm more than just body parts. I'm the sum of many other things. Who I am as a person, how I relate to people, that should count more than your physical attributes. Definitely. Look, I mean, that's why I use prosthetics, because you want your clothes to look good when you're wearing them. I could. So you also don't want to make, yes. And for me, it's an issue of being conscious of those around you. You don't want to make people uncomfortable. Have you ever been around people who are uncomfortable for you? They look at you
Mm,
and go, "Oh, shame. I don't want that." So for me, that's where the prosthetics came in. But the issue of the hysterectomy, I think don't make it a first date type of conversation. It will definitely scare off the person, but get to know them, let them get to know you, so that whatever decision they make when you do tell them has nothing to do with the hysterectomy. It has to do with probably other important things, where if they strongly feel, no, but I would want children and this person can't have kids, then it is what it is. But there are some men who will stay with you, even if you don't have kids. He loves you and is prepared to stay with you and probably
mhm,
consider other avenues. And I think in that case, as a woman now, we then need to also be considerate. I
mhm,
think this one, a lot of women will not agree with me, but I think you now look at the options that are available. you know do you go for adoption? Don't then say, no, we can't adopt. If he suggests adoption, I think meet him halfway, because it's not his fault that you can't have kids anymore, but you also can't punish him for your condition, which is not your fault either. But I think those are some of the things you now need to consider. So what do we do? Because I think when you try and say no, 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 that's where you have cases where 5 years, 10 years into the marriage, right? You think we're on the same page, you find out no, he's got a 7-year-old somewhere. Maybe because you were afraid to handle and talk about that issue. Let's address. So it goes both ways. You need to be prepared for the consequences once you have that conversation. He may walk, and unfortunately, you can't fault him and say, "But why are you walking away?" It's his decision, and it's a risk we take. But what do we do?
Maxine, do you have anything to add? These are all very important
Well,
points.
you know what? I'm going to lighten up the conversation because today I'm wearing my Jamaican dress because in Jamaica, it is our Heroes Day. And I just want
Oh,
to tie in the history of Jamaica and Zimbabwe that when you guys separated from Britain in 1980, can you believe that was 40 years ago? That our Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley, came.
Marley.
Yes, he came and he celebrated the independence with you. So there you go.
Happy Independence Day, Jamaica.
happy independence to you. So before we come to a close, I just want, starting with Sandra, can you share your final thoughts about breast cancer awareness? And obviously, you've given us a lot of what you have learned, which I think you should talk a lot more about it, and share your experience and use your voice to help other women who, and also help our community to educate, so that this topic stops being a taboo, but is viewed as.
Um, okay, I think maybe for me in closing, I would really stress the need for going for screening, whether it's for pap smear or, just those, there are even free ones. Like right now in Zimbabwe, there's always the October special that the Cancer Association of Zimbabwe offers, where I think last year it was actually free. Then this year, I think it's just $1. But at least it will save you so much more later. So I would say let's go for testing, let's go for screening. Yes, it's focusing on breast cancer, but just all the forms of cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, cervical cancer. Just go for testing. Go for testing. I cannot emphasize that enough. And in the event that you do find yourself, get the necessary support. Do not be afraid to reach out. Do not be afraid to talk about it. And you know, just get the necessary support around you. And sometimes support doesn't necessarily have to come from family because we all process things differently. But like I said, the Cancer Association of Zimbabwe does meet on, I don't know if they've changed now with the COVID 19 pandemic, but they used to meet at 1 p.m., between 1 and 2 on Wednesdays. So definitely, please, please, please go get support, get as much information as possible before you make any decisions. I remember reading books and books and books and books and watching videos even of the surgery just so that I understand what will happen. So please, knowledge is power.
Thank you so much.
Well, Monica, I just wanted to thank you for serving the community. I'd like to thank Sandy for just being a pillar and a tower of strength. You know what? Life and death are intertwined. We have to have these uncomfortable conversations. And you would be surprised, the more that you take control of your life, the more you will feel alive. So an ounce of cure is worth a pound of prevention. Let's have these conversations.
Yes. So I will just read some of the comments that people have put up, so that we know that we are engaging with our community. Just before we closing here, thank you, ladies, for talking about. It is a disease that can strike anyone at any time, including men. And so here's what we didn't talk about. Men actually have
Yes.
as well. And Ken Bumira said, great eye-opening conversation. And Yaya Rudo, thank you, ladies. We need this. We are not our body parts. It's really important. And then she also likes that everyone around the patient needs counseling. And I think it's really great. So thank you so much to our viewers. I hope I've learned a lot. I'm one of those people who had no idea, but I've learned so much from Sandy. And I think in a couple of days, we'll be talking about this in Shona, just to, enable our grannies to know what is going on this month, as well as we can only reduce the stigma by talking and sharing these ideas. Thank you so much, ladies. I am so honored, and I'm grateful for you taking time to spend your whole over an hour with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.